The papers slid across my father's mahogany desk, and my world stopped. There, in black ink on official letterwork, was my signature. Except I had never signed anything. My hands trembled as I picked up the document, staring at the forged loops and curves that were supposed to be mine. Sale of property. 247 Maple Grove Avenue. My childhood home. My inheritance from Grandma Rose. Sold. Without my knowledge. Without my permission. The bank statement attached showed $380,000 transferred to an account I didn't recognize. My father sat behind his desk, tie loosened, expression blank. Not apologetic. Not surprised I'd found out. Just waiting. How could you do this to me? The words came out as a whisper, but inside I was screaming. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. You weren't using it anyway, Nia. Someone had to make a practical decision. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. My name is Nia Chin. I'm 29 years old, a graphic designer in Portland, and until 3 minutes ago, I believed my father was someone I could trust. I grew up in that house on Maple Grove. Grandma Rose left it to me specifically when she passed 2 years ago. I've been planning to renovate it, maybe rent it out. It was my safety net, my future. And he'd stolen it. I stood frozen in that office, the document still clutched in my shaking hands. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Not here. Not in front of him. The betrayal felt physical, like something sharp lodged in my chest. I thought about all the times I'd defended him to my brother Marcus, who always said Dad was selfish. All the Sunday dinners where I'd listened to his business advice, believing he had my best interests at heart. The room spun slightly. I gripped the edge of his desk. That account, I managed to say, pointing at the bank statement. Where is it? Where did the money go? He didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable. Investments. Business opportunities. Things you wouldn't understand, Nia. That condescending tone. Like I was still 12 years old and asking about his work. Except I wasn't a child anymore. And this wasn't some minor family disagreement. This was fraud. The document showed a closing date from 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks he'd been walking around, having dinners with me, asking about my design projects, all while knowing he'd forged my signature and stolen my inheritance. I noticed something else then. The buyer's name, Westbrook Properties LLC. And a lawyer's stamp, Bernard and Associates. I left his office without another word. What could I say? Screaming wouldn't bring back what he'd taken. My car was parked 3 blocks away, and I walked in a daze, barely registering the Portland drizzle soaking through my jacket. People passed me on the sidewalk, living their normal lives, while mine crumbled. At home, I spread the documents across my kitchen table. My roommate Tasha found me there an hour later, still staring. Nia, what happened? She asked, setting down her grocery bags. I told her everything. Watched her face shift from confusion to shock to rage. That's not just wrong, she said firmly. That's illegal. You need to call someone. Lawyer. Police. Both. She was right. But part of me still couldn't process it. This was my father. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd helped me move into my first apartment, who'd cried at Grandma Rose's funeral. That same man had forged my signature and stolen from me. I pulled out my phone and started searching for real estate lawyers. My hands were steadier now. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by something colder. Determination. If he thought I'd just accept this, he didn't know me at all. The lawyer's office smelled like old books and coffee. Attorney Patricia Wells was in her 50s, sharp-eyed behind wire-rimmed glasses. I laid out everything. The forged signature, the property sale, the mysterious account. She examined the documents carefully, making notes on a yellow legal pad. This is forgery, she said finally. Clear-cut fraud. The good news is that makes the sale voidable. The bad news is proving it, and unwinding the transaction will take time. How much time? Yes. Months, possibly. We'll need a handwriting expert to verify the forgery. We'll need to file police reports, contact the buyer's lawyer, potentially sue your father for the proceeds. Pause. I have to ask, are you prepared for that? Going after your own father? I thought about his blank expression when I'd confronted him. The casual way he'd dismissed my pain. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. Patricia nodded. Then let's start with documentation. I need every interaction you've had about this property. Emails, texts, anything showing you didn't consent to this sale. I left her office with a list of action items and a strange sense of purpose. He tried to make me powerless. Instead, he'd awakened something fierce in me. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Stop overreacting. We can discuss this like adults. I stared at that message. Overreacting. As if his crime was just a minor misunderstanding. I didn't reply. The next morning, I started digging into my father's finances. Not out of nosiness but necessity. Patricia had suggested there might be a pattern here. Other questionable transactions. I had access to some family documents from when I'd helped him organize his home office last year. What I found made my stomach turn. A second account at a different bank. One I'd never heard him mention. Statements showing regular transfers from various sources, including the family trust Grandma Rose had established. Money that was supposed to be divided between me, Marcus, and our cousin Vanessa. Money that had somehow ended up in Dad's personal account instead. The property sale wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of something bigger. I called Marcus in Seattle. He picked up on the third ring, sounding distracted. Hey Nia. What's up? Dad forged my signature and sold Grandma's house. Silence. Then. What? I explained everything, including what I'd just discovered about the trust fund. Marcus swore long and creative. That son of a... I knew something was off. Remember when he said the trust was underperforming, and we'd get distributions later? He was stealing from us. We need to tell Vanessa, I said. And we need to figure out exactly how much he's taken. Marcus agreed to fly down that weekend. Before we hung up, he said, Nia. Sorry. I know you always wanted to believe he was better than this. Saturday morning, I drove back to my father's house for what I'd been dreading. A direct confrontation. Marcus came with me, and his presence gave me courage. Dad answered the door in his weekend casual clothes, looking annoyed rather than worried. I thought we were past this drama, he said. Past it. I stepped inside without waiting for invitation. You committed fraud. Stole from your own daughter. And now I've found out about the trust fund too. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise maybe. That I'd figured it out. You're making this bigger than it needs to be, he said. His voice taking on that familiar soothing tone. Gaslighting, I realized. That's what this was. I've always managed family money responsibly. You never cared about that house anyway. You were letting it sit empty. That was my choice to make, I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. Not yours. Marcus stepped forward. Where's the money, Dad? From the trust. From Nia's house. Where did it go? Investments, he said again, like that explained everything. Business ventures that will benefit all of us eventually. Lies, Marcus said flatly. Show us the bank statements. Prove these investments exist. Dad's jaw tightened. I don't have to prove anything to you. This is my house. If you can't be respectful, leave. The dismissal was casual, arrogant. He truly thought he'd get away with this. I left that confrontation more determined than ever. Over the next week, I became a detective in my own life, gathering evidence like it was a full-time job. Emails from 2 years ago where I'd told Dad I was keeping the house, planning to renovate. Text messages where I'd asked him to check on the property while I was traveling. Bank statements showing I'd been paying property taxes and insurance on time. Every piece of proof that the house was mine, that I'd never consented to any sale. Patricia Wells helped me file a police report for forgery and fraud. The officer who took my statement looked sympathetic, but warned me that family cases like this were complicated. Even with clear evidence, sometimes prosecutors are reluctant to pursue charges against family members, he said. But we'll investigate. I also hired a handwriting expert named Dr. Felix Brennan. He examined the forged signature alongside my real signatures from various documents. His preliminary report was damning. The signature on the sale documents was inconsistent with the subject's natural hand patterns and showed evidence of traced or simulated writing. Meanwhile, my father's intimidation tactics began. Not threats exactly, but pressure. He called my Uncle Warren his brother, and apparently spun some story about me being ungrateful and difficult. Uncle Warren called me confused. "Your dad says you're making accusations about that old house. What's going on, Nia?" I explained the truth. Sent him copies of the documents. Watched his tone change from skeptical to angry. But not everyone believed me. Some of Dad's friends, people I'd known my whole life, chose his version of events. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I'd been trying to contact the buyer, Westbrook Properties LLC, to understand their side of the transaction. That's when I reached Bernard and Associates, the law firm that had represented them. I was transferred to attorney James Kozlov, who handled the purchase. I expected resistance, maybe hostility. Instead, his voice was careful, professional. "Miss Chen, I'm glad you called. There were some irregularities in that transaction that concerned me at the time." My heart jumped. "What kind of irregularities?" "Your father represented that he had power of attorney to sign on your behalf," James explained. "But the documentation he provided seemed insufficient. When I pressed him for additional verification, he became defensive. I advised my client to proceed cautiously, but they were eager to close quickly. This was huge. A lawyer on the buyer's side who'd noticed something was wrong. "Would you be willing to testify to that?" "Yes." "Or provide a statement?" There was a pause. "Miss Chen, if your signature was forged, then the sale itself is likely invalid. My client would have an interest in resolving this properly." He gave me his direct line and suggested we speak with our respective attorneys present. After I hung up, I sat there processing. This wasn't just me against my father anymore. The buyer's lawyer had concerns. The transaction itself was legally questionable. Suddenly, I had an ally I hadn't expected. Called Patricia immediately. "We need to move fast," she said. "If we can work with the buyer's attorney, we might be able to unwind this without years of litigation." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the past, trying to understand when my father had changed. Or had he always been like this? I remembered being 16, overhearing an argument between my parents before their divorce. Mom had accused him of always putting himself first, and treating family money like your personal piggy bank. I dismissed it as divorce bitterness. Now I wondered if she'd seen this side of him years ago. I called her the next morning. She lived in Arizona now, remarried and happy. "Mom, I need to ask you something about Dad." I explained everything. She listened in silence, then sighed heavily. "Oh, Nia, I'm so sorry. I'd hoped he'd changed. This happened before." "Not exactly like this," she said. "But your grandmother, his mother, had concerns before she died. She made sure her will was airtight, left specific properties to specific people, because she didn't trust your father not to manipulate things. That's why Grandma Rose had left the house directly to me in her will, I realized. Not to the family trust Dad managed. She'd been protecting me. There's something else you should know, Mom continued. Your father's business failed about 3 years ago. He never told you kids. He's been living on credit and apparently family money ever since. The pieces clicked together. The fraud wasn't just greed. It was desperation. He'd stolen from me because he needed the money and thought he could get away with it. Somehow that made it worse. Patricia Wells filed a motion to freeze the proceeds from the sale. It was a temporary measure, but it would prevent my father from spending or hiding the money while we built our case. The hearing was set for 10 days out. I spent those days oscillating between anxiety and anger. Tasha kept me grounded, bringing me food when I forgot to eat, reminding me to sleep. "You're doing the right thing," she said one evening as we watched a movie I wasn't really paying attention to. "Standing up to family when they're wrong, that takes real courage." I wasn't sure about courage. Mostly I felt tired and sad. The family I'd thought I had was an illusion. The hearing arrived quickly. The courthouse was downtown, all marble and echoing footsteps. My father arrived with his lawyer, a slick-looking man named Paul Derringer who specialized in asset protection, according to his website. We sat on opposite sides of the courtroom. Dad wouldn't look at me. The judge, a woman named Harriet Townsend, reviewed the motion carefully. Patricia presented Dr. Brennan's handwriting analysis. She showed the police report. She introduced James Kozlov, the buyer's attorney, who testified about the irregularities he'd noticed. Dad's lawyer argued that this was a family misunderstanding, and that the signature question was ambiguous. Judge Townsend wasn't buying it. "Mr. Derringer, the handwriting analysis is quite clear, and Ms. Chen has provided substantial evidence that she never consented to this sale." She granted the temporary freeze. The money would stay in escrow until the case was resolved. Walking out of that courtroom, I saw my father's face twisted with fury. For the first time I realized he might actually lose this. The freeze drove my father to desperation. Within days, he launched what I can only call a smear campaign. He called relatives, old family friends, anyone who would listen. The story he told painted me as a manipulative, ungrateful daughter trying to steal from him. Some people believed it. My Aunt Helen called me in tears, begging me to stop this madness before you tear the family apart. I tried to explain, sent her documents, but she'd already chosen a side. Uncle Warren, though, was different. He'd done his own digging after our earlier conversation and called me with news. "Your father owes money to some serious people," Warren said. "Investors in his failed business ventures. I think that's why he needed that house money so badly. He's in deep, Nia." "How deep?" "Enough that if he doesn't pay soon, there might be lawsuits. Maybe worse." This changed things. My father wasn't just greedy. He was cornered. That made him more dangerous. The harassment escalated. He started showing up at my apartment building, waiting by my car, trying to corner me into talking. "We can settle this privately," he'd say. "You drop the legal case, I give you half the money. We both move on." I documented every encounter, took photos, saved voicemails. Patricia filed for a restraining order. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. An old family friend, Beatrice Morrison, reached out. She was 72, had known our family for decades. "Nia," she said over coffee, "I need to tell you something about your father. Something that happened years ago with my sister's estate." What she described was eerily similar. Forged documents, manipulated trust funds, money that disappeared. "We never pursued it legally," Beatrice said. "Family pressure. But I've always regretted that. Don't make the same mistake." Evidence of my father's accomplice emerged during a meeting with James Kozlov and his client, Theodore Westbrook. We met at James's office, a modern space with a view of the river. Theodore was in his 60s, a real estate developer who looked uncomfortable. "I feel like I've been used," he said. "Your father approached me through a real estate agent named Felix Kane. Felix assured me everything was legitimate, that you were an absent owner eager to sell." Felix Kane. I wrote the name down. "Felix Kane has a reputation," James added carefully. "Several transactions he's brokered have later proven questionable. Title defects, forged documents. Nothing that's landed him in legal trouble yet, but enough to raise eyebrows." "You think he knew the signature was forged?" "Yes." Theodore and James exchanged looks. "Felix pushed hard for a quick closing," Theodore said. "No inspection period, minimal due diligence." At the time I thought I was getting a deal. Now I wonder if he knew there were problems and wanted to close before they surfaced. This was bigger than I'd realized. My father hadn't acted alone. Felix Kane, the real estate agent, was involved. Maybe others too. After the meeting I called Patricia. "We need to investigate Felix Kane," I said. "If he knew about the forgery, he's complicit." "I agree," Patricia said. "And if he's done this before, there might be other victims. Other families your father and Felix have scammed together." The case was expanding. What started as one forged signature was becoming a pattern of fraud spanning years. Part of me was overwhelmed, but another part felt vindicated. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about stopping them. The stress of everything started catching up with me. I wasn't sleeping well, surviving on coffee and determination. My design work suffered. I missed deadlines, turned in subpar projects. My boss, Mrs. Stephanie Kwan, called me into her office. "Nia, what's going on? This isn't like you." I'd kept the situation private, but now I cracked. Told her everything. She listened, then surprised me. "Take family leave," she said. 2 weeks paid. "Deal with this. Your job will be here when you're ready to come back." That kindness, when I expected criticism, nearly broke me. I cried in her office, apologizing. She handed me tissues and told me to stop apologizing. "Family betrayal is traumatic," she said. "You're allowed to struggle. Just don't let him win by destroying your life too." Her words stuck with me. My father had already taken my inheritance, my sense of family, my trust. I couldn't let him take my career and mental health too. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Yolanda Ruiz. She specialized in family trauma. Our first session I told her everything and she said something that shifted my perspective. "You're not just fighting for money or property. You're fighting for your sense of self. For the truth about who your father is versus who you thought he was." That night, I lay awake thinking about all the times I'd made excuses for him. All the times I'd convinced myself his selfishness was just personality quirks. I'd been lying to myself to maintain the illusion of a loving family. No more. The truth was painful, but it was real. And real was better than comfortable lies. I decided to stop reacting and start strategizing. Patricia had taught me that revenge was best served through legal channels, and I was learning patience. We had evidence. We had allies. Now we needed a plan. Marcus flew back down, and we spent a weekend mapping everything out. We created a timeline of Dad's fraudulent activities. The forged signature. The trust fund diversions. His connection to Felix Kane. Other suspicious transactions Beatrice Morrison had mentioned. We documented everything in a shared folder, color-coded and cross-referenced. "This is insane," Marcus said, staring at the spreadsheet we'd created. "It's like he's been running a criminal enterprise out of his home office." Vanessa joined us by video call. She'd been going through Grandma Rose's old papers and found something crucial. Letters where Dad had pressed Grandma to change her will, to put him in control of all assets. She'd refused, writing in one letter, "I love you, son, but I don't trust your judgment with money." "We should give all this to the police," Vanessa said. "Not yet," Patricia advised when I called her. "We're building a case, but we need to be strategic about timing. If we show our hand too early, your father and Felix will lawyer up and scatter." She had a different suggestion. Let them think they're winning. Let Dad believe the temporary freeze was the worst that would happen. Meanwhile, we'd keep gathering evidence, pulling in more victims, building an ironclad case. "When we move," Patricia said, "it'll be overwhelming and undeniable. They won't see it coming." It felt manipulative, playing the long game. But fair play hadn't worked. My father had taught me that. The motion to permanently freeze the sale proceeds came 2 months after the initial hearing. Patricia filed it with a mountain of supporting evidence. Handwriting analysis, testimony from James Kozlov, statements from other victims who'd come forward after Beatrice spread the word. My father's lawyer tried to fight it, but his arguments were weak. "Your Honor," Paul Derringer said, This is a family dispute being blown out of proportion. Ms. Chen is estranged from her father and using the legal system for revenge. I wanted to scream. Estranged. I'd had Sunday dinners with him until he stole my house. Patricia stood calmly. Your Honor, we have documented proof of forgery. We have testimony from the buyer's attorney about irregularities. We have evidence of a pattern of fraudulent behavior. This isn't a family dispute. It's a crime. Judge Townsend reviewed the evidence for what felt like an eternity. Finally she spoke. The court finds sufficient evidence of fraud to permanently freeze the proceeds pending criminal investigation. Furthermore, I'm ordering Mr. Chen to provide a full accounting of all family trust assets within 30 days. My father's face went pale. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about everything. Outside the courthouse he tried to approach me. Patricia stepped between us. No contact, Mr. Chen. Anything you need to say goes through legal channels. He pointed at me, his face twisted with anger. You're destroying this family, Nia. Over money. This is who you really are. I met his eyes steadily. No, Dad. This is who you really are. I'm just making sure everyone else knows it too. My father tried one last manipulation. Weaponizing the family. He convinced Aunt Helen to host a family meeting to resolve things peacefully. She called me pleading. Just come, Nia. Listen to his side. Maybe there's a compromise. Almost said no. But Patricia suggested I go with her present and record everything. Let him talk, she said. Let him show everyone who he really is. The meeting was at Aunt Helen's house. 20 people showed up. Cousins, aunts, uncles, family friends. Dad had clearly promised them this would be resolved today. He stood at the head of the table like he was chairing a board meeting. Thank you all for coming, he began. I asked you here because my daughter has been spreading lies about me, and I want to set the record straight. I sat quietly, Patricia beside me, phone recording in my pocket. He spun a story about how I'd always been difficult and demanding. How he'd tried to help me by managing the property sale. How I was now suing him out of spite. Some people nodded along. Others looked uncomfortable. Then Uncle Warren spoke up. What about the trust fund, brother? Explain the missing distributions. Dad's smooth facade cracked. The trust is fine. The money's just in long-term investments. Show us, Warren said. Right now. Pull up the accounts. Dad couldn't. Because the money wasn't in investments. It was gone. Stolen. The room shifted. People started asking questions, demanding answers. Marcus pulled out our timeline, started walking through documented evidence of fraud. I watched my father's lies collapse in real time. Aunt Helen's face crumpled as she realized she'd been defending a thief. The meeting ended with most of the family on my side, finally understanding the truth. During a routine search of documents, I found something that changed everything. A key. It was taped to the back of an old family photo I'd taken from Dad's house. Small, brass, with a number stamped on it. 347. It's a safe deposit box key, Patricia said when I showed her. Question is, which bank? We tried 3 before we found it. Pacific Northwest Community Bank, a branch my father had never mentioned. Patricia obtained a court order allowing me access as part of the fraud investigation. The bank manager, a nervous man named Roger Walsh, led us to the vault. Inside box 347 were documents that made my blood run cold. Copies of forged signatures on multiple property transfers. Bank statements for accounts I'd never heard of. A ledger detailing years of embezzled money from the family trust. Emails between my father and Felix Kane discussing opportunities and targets. But the most damning evidence was a letter, handwritten, addressed to no one. It was essentially a confession written in my father's hand. If anyone finds this, I'm already caught. I started small, just borrowing from the trust temporarily. But it snowballed. The business failed. I owed too much. The house sale seemed like the only way out. By the time Nia noticed, I'd hoped to have replaced everything. I know what I've done is wrong. I just couldn't see another option. He knew, I whispered. He knew it was wrong and he did it anyway. Patricia was already photographing everything. This is what we've been waiting for. Written confession. Evidence of premeditation. Multiple victims. We left the bank with copies of everything and I felt something shift. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. Support came from unexpected places. Theodore Westbrook, the buyer, reached out through James Kozlov with a proposal. I never wanted to profit from fraud, Theodore said when we met. I'll deed the property back to you, Ms. Chen. No cost. I just want my purchase money returned from the frozen proceeds. His generosity shocked me. You'll take a loss on legal fees, time, everything, I said. Doing the right thing isn't about profit, he replied simply. James Kozlov went further. I'm representing you pro bono for the civil case against Felix Kane, he said. That man has been a stain on real estate practice for years. It's time someone held him accountable. Even people I barely knew stepped forward. Neighbors from Maple Grove Avenue wrote letters supporting my character. Old friends offered testimony about my plans for the house. Dr. Brennan, the handwriting expert, reduced his fee to almost nothing. This case matters, he explained. If your father gets away with this, it sends a message that family fraud is acceptable. Marcus and Vanessa created a legal fund, raising money from extended family to cover costs Patricia's firm hadn't waived. It wasn't much, but the gesture meant everything. My mother called with surprising news. Your father's second wife, Tracy, reached out to me. She divorced him 5 years ago for, quote, financial impropriety. She's willing to testify about his pattern of behavior. The network of support grew daily. I'd started this fight feeling alone. Now I had an army. My father had spent years building a reputation as a respectable businessman. That reputation was crumbling as more people learned the truth. His friends stopped returning calls. His business contacts distanced themselves. Slowly, inevitably, he was being isolated by his own actions. I'd learned patience, but I couldn't resist subtle warfare. I started sending careful legal notices to my father. Nothing threatening, just information. Copies of evidence we'd filed. Names of witnesses who'd come forward. Dates of upcoming depositions. Each notice was a reminder that his walls were closing in. Patricia called it psychological pressure. I called it watching karma work. He started making mistakes, sloppy ones. He called me directly, violating the restraining order. I recorded it. He tried to access the safe deposit box and was denied. The bank reported it to our lawyers. He posted on social media about ungrateful children and betrayal, giving us evidence of his state of mind. His lawyer, Paul Derringer, withdrew from the case, citing irreconcilable differences. Translation: Dad couldn't pay him anymore, and the case was unwinnable. Dad hired a cheaper attorney, a recent graduate named Amy Holbrook, who looked terrified every time we showed up with new evidence. Meanwhile, Felix Kane was cracking. James Kozlov's firm filed a civil suit against him, and Felix started pointing fingers at my father. He told me everything was legitimate, Felix claimed in a deposition. I trusted his documentation. Watching them turn on each other was satisfying in a dark way. They'd conspired together, and now they'd destroy each other trying to save themselves. My father showed up at my apartment building one evening, waiting by the entrance. I saw him from half a block away and called Patricia. She told me to wait, then contacted the police. He was arrested for violating the restraining order, spent a night in jail, and emerged looking haggard, finally understanding that his old tactics wouldn't work anymore. The criminal investigation went public. Local news picked up the story. Prominent businessman accused of defrauding daughter. My father's face appeared on the evening broadcast, looking trapped outside the courthouse. The story gained traction, not just because of the fraud but because of the family angle. People were fascinated by a father stealing from his daughter, forging her signature, showing zero remorse. Comment sections filled with outrage. Social media spread the story. Strangers messaged me with support and their own stories of family financial abuse. Dad's business, what was left of it, collapsed. Clients fled. Partners cut ties. The downtown office he'd been so proud of closed, a for lease sign appearing in the window. I watched it happen with mixed feelings. Part of me felt vindicated. But part of me, the part that still remembered childhood, felt sad. This didn't have to happen. He'd made choices that led here step by step. His new attorney, Amy Holbrook, tried damage control. She released a statement claiming my father was the victim of a vindictive daughter and biased investigation. The statement backfired spectacularly when Uncle Warren held a press conference presenting documented evidence of the fraud. "My brother is a thief," Warren said bluntly. "He stole from his daughter, from our family trust, and from others. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's criminal behavior." The media coverage became relentless. Everywhere my father went, reporters followed. His social life evaporated. His reputation, built over 40 years, destroyed in weeks. I stayed quiet publicly, letting the evidence speak. Patricia advised that silence made me look more credible than any statement could. "Let him dig his own grave," she said. And he did, with every desperate post, every angry interview, every attempt to play the victim. The final legal move came on a Tuesday morning in October, 6 months after I'd first found those forged documents. James Kozlov filed the final paperwork, a comprehensive lawsuit against my father and Felix Kane for fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty. The filing was 53 pages of documented evidence, witness statements, and expert analysis. It was overwhelming and undeniable. Simultaneously, the district attorney filed criminal charges. Forgery in the first degree, theft, identity theft, and conspiracy. Combined, the charges carried a potential sentence of 15 years. I sat in Patricia's office when she told me the news, and I felt nothing at first. Not triumph. Not relief. Just numb. "This is what we've been working toward," Patricia said gently. "You did it, Nia. You held him accountable." The reality sank in slowly. My father would face trial. He would likely be convicted. He might go to prison. The family would never be the same. That evening I drove to Maple Grove Avenue. The house stood empty, exactly as it had been. Theodore had been true to his word about returning it to me. I walked through the rooms, remembering. Grandma Rose teaching me to bake in the kitchen. Playing in the backyard with Marcus. Family dinners before the divorce. Good memories, now tainted by everything that came after. My phone buzzed. A text from my father's number, probably sent before his lawyer could stop him. "Are you happy now? You've destroyed everything." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back. "No, Dad. You destroyed everything. I just made sure you couldn't pretend you hadn't." I blocked his number and stood in my grandmother's house, my house, feeling something shift. Not happiness, not yet. But closure, maybe. The beginning of peace. The next few weeks brought strange clarity. With the legal proceedings in motion, I could finally breathe. I went back to work, apologized to Mrs. Kwan for the missed deadlines, and threw myself into a major project. Design work became therapy, creating beauty when my personal life had been so ugly. Dr. Ruiz helped me process everything. "You're grieving," she explained. "Not just the father you lost, but the father you thought you had. That person never existed, and accepting that is its own kind of death." She was right. I'd been mourning someone who was a fiction, a role my father had played when it suited him. The real man, the one who'd forged my signature without hesitation, was a stranger. Friends I'd lost touch with reached out after seeing the news. Some offered support. Others were just curious. I learned quickly who actually cared. Tasha threw me a "you survived" party, just close friends, nothing dramatic. We ate pizza and watched terrible movies, and for a few hours I felt normal. Marcus and Vanessa came down for Thanksgiving. We had dinner at my apartment, deliberately not at family gathering. New traditions, Vanessa said, raising a glass. For the family we choose. Mom called from Arizona. I'm proud of you, she said. I know this wasn't easy. But you did what I didn't have the courage to do years ago. You stood up to him. Her words meant more than I expected. I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everyone he'd ever hurt or manipulated. Every woman who'd been told she was overreacting. Every victim who'd been pressured to keep quiet for family harmony. This was bigger than my house or my inheritance. It was about refusing to enable cruelty just because it wore a familiar face. The trial date was set for February. My father showed up to the arraignment looking diminished, wearing an ill-fitting suit. His confidence finally broken. His new lawyer entered a not guilty plea, but even she looked defeated. The evidence was public record now. Anyone could see what he'd done. The courtroom was packed with press and spectators. I sat in the front row with Patricia, Marcus, and Vanessa. Across the aisle, my father sat alone. No family supporters. No friends. Just Amy Holbrook, his lawyer, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Diana Torres, presented the case methodically. The forged signature. The stolen money. The conspiracy with Felix Kane. The years of embezzlement from the family trust. When she displayed the letter we'd found in the safe deposit box, my father's written confession, the courtroom murmured. His lawyer tried to argue it was taken out of context, but how do you take a confession out of context? Character witnesses testified. Uncle Warren described the family trust violations. Beatrice Morrison talked about her sister's estate. Theodore Westbrook explained the irregularities in the property sale. Each testimony added weight, building an undeniable picture. Then I was called to testify. I walked to the stand, raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth. Patricia had prepared me, but nothing could fully prepare me for looking at my father while describing his betrayal. I kept my voice steady, stuck to facts, didn't let emotion cloud the testimony. When I described finding the forged documents, the courtroom was silent. When I explained how the house was my inheritance from Grandma Rose, specifically meant for me, several jurors looked angry. My father's lawyer cross-examined me, trying to suggest I'd been estranged from him, that I had motivation to lie. I calmly explained our relationship history, the regular dinners, the trust I'd had. Patricia had taught me well. Stay calm, stick to truth, let the evidence speak. When I stepped down, my father finally met my eyes. For a moment I saw something there. Regret, maybe. Or just self-pity. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. When it came, she was thorough and harsh. Mr. Chen, Judge Townsend said, you betrayed your daughter's trust in the most fundamental way. You forged her signature, stole her inheritance, and showed no remorse. You manipulated family for personal gain. The court sentences you to 8 years in prison, with restitution of all stolen funds. Years. He was 61. He'd be nearly 70 when released. The courtroom erupted in whispers. My father's face was blank, shock maybe. Felix Kane, tried separately, received 5 years and permanent loss of his real estate license. The money, all of it, was ordered returned. The house proceeds, the trust fund diversions, everything traced. Some of it would take time to recover, assets to liquidate, but we'd get it eventually. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I gave a brief statement Patricia had helped me write. This case was never about revenge. It was about accountability. Family ties don't excuse criminal behavior. I hope this encourages others facing family fraud to speak up. Marcus hugged me. Vanessa cried. Uncle Warren shook his head, sad but accepting. It had to happen, he said. Sometimes the only way to save a family is to hold the sick parts accountable. That evening, I returned to Maple Grove Avenue. I decided to keep the house, renovate it as originally planned, maybe move in. It deserved a future, not just a past. I stood in the living room, imagining new paint, new furniture, new memories. Good ones this time. My phone rang. How are you? She asked. Relieved, I said honestly. Sad. But mostly relieved. You did good, baby. You did so good. After we hung up, I walked through the empty house one more time, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not for reconciliation with my father. That ship had sailed. But hope for myself, for the future. For the family I'd build around chosen connections instead of obligatory blood ties. 6 months after sentencing, I moved into the renovated house on Maple Grove Avenue. The place looked completely different. Fresh paint, modern fixtures, Grandma Rose's garden restored. I hosted a housewarming party, inviting everyone who'd supported me through the nightmare. Tasha, Marcus, Vanessa, Uncle Warren, Patricia, James Kozlov, Dr. Ruiz. Even Theodore Westbrook came, bringing champagne. We stood in the backyard, these people who'd become my chosen family, and I felt gratitude so profound it hurt. Thank you, I said, raising my glass. Not just for helping me fight, but for reminding me what family should actually look like. The settlement money had come through, finally. The house was mine, free and clear. The trust fund was being redistributed properly. Vanessa and Marcus got their shares. I'd even set aside money for therapy, knowing I'd need it for years to process everything. My father sent a letter from prison. Patricia forwarded it with a warning. You don't have to read this. I did anyway. It was self-pitying and partially apologetic, but mostly blame-shifting. How the business failure had driven him to desperation. How he'd planned to pay everything back. How my legal action had been excessive. I read it once, felt nothing and filed it away. Maybe someday I'd feel something about it. But not today. Today I was focused on moving forward. My design career was thriving. I'd gotten promoted at work. My relationship with Marcus and Vanessa was stronger than ever. I'd even started dating someone, a kind man I'd met at Dr. Ruiz's recommendation through a support group. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Built on truth instead of comfortable lies. I stood in my grandmother's house, my house, looking at photos from the housewarming party, and I smiled. Not because my father was in prison, though justice mattered. But because I'd fought for myself when it would have been easier to stay silent. Because I'd learned that family should be chosen, not endured. Because I'd discovered that standing up to betrayal, even when it comes from someone you love, isn't about revenge. It's about refusing to let cruelty win. It's about protecting yourself and others. It's about truth. And sometimes truth is the most powerful weapon you have. The story didn't have a fairy tale ending. My father was still in prison. The family was permanently fractured. Some relatives still blamed me for making it public. But I'd reclaimed what was mine. My property, my peace, my power. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What does family mean to you? Please share below and subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine.